La entrevista a María Corina Machado que ha enloquecido a Nicolás Maduro y a sus esbirros.
So with that, guys, the undisputed leader of the Venezuelan opposition. She is literally doing this interview in hiding because the Maduro regime is trying to put her in prison or even worse. María Corina Machado, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure.
So, I mean, this is pretty historic. This is certainly the first time I've interviewed someone actually in hiding. Because the Maduro regime wants you in prison because your party beat him in the polls, frankly, so badly I've never seen it, right? I'm used to seeing elections that are won, half a point here, half a point there. I mean, an absolute drubbing. They did everything they could to stop you. You still won. Strangely enough, almost no one reports about that in the United States, I imagine because they're on the same side of the dictatorial regimes. But what is happening in Venezuela right now?
Well, what's happening in Venezuela is that we are living under a furious tyranny. Venezuela has been hijacked by a gang that is connected to drug cartels and to the enemies of the United States, such as Iran, Hezbollah, Hamas, China, and so on. Maduro has taken over by force, even though, as you said, it was a landslide victory. We humiliated the regime under their own extreme unfair conditions, and he took out all the facades. So the reality here is we are facing a criminal system. This is not a political crisis. This has to be addressed as a law enforcement dynamic. But we have a huge opportunity to transform Venezuela in front of us because the regime is weaker than ever done.
Yeah, it seems like it. I always say for us here in America, obviously what you've gone through is an even more extreme version. But, you were on a no-fly list. They did that to Tulsi Gabbard, who's now in the cabinet. Obviously, the lawfare, they've done that to myself, my father, my family, and so many Americans for so long. It got so ridiculous that it seems... finally, the American people understood what was happening. They were able to see through the propaganda that I'm sure was done through, regime media, which I think is frankly quite similar here in America. And eventually, the people were able to take over. What do you think can happen in Venezuela? Is that control slipping? The people are obviously understanding it based on the vote tallies. But when they don't get what they clearly voted for, how long can the regime hang on for?
Well, the only thing the regime has left is arms and repression and lies, and certainly money that flows from criminal activities such as drug trafficking, gold smuggling, laundering of millions of dollars, and some resources that come from very obscure oil licenses. And this is resources that are not used for schools or hospitals. This is used for repression and for a huge propaganda campaign and structure such as the one we mentioned. But Maduro has lost total support. I mean, if the elections had been, simply slightest competitive, it would have ended 90-10, not 70-30. But the regime has also lost the support of the military. And this is very important. They lost in every single polling station where the military voted. And we were able to get and collect the tally sheets and prove our victory because we had the support of the military. Also, Maduro is totally internationally isolated. So the only thing he's got left is repression and the resources that are coming from abroad.
Yeah, I mean, Maduro's regime's clearly turned Venezuela into a cesspool of socialism, communism, a dictatorship. Venezuela has been, wrecked by oppression and dictatorship. What is it like living in a country like that? And, given what you've seen happen to, this once great nation of Venezuela, the people who I know who escaped before the insanity speak so highly of the beauty of the country, the resources, everything. Why should Americans care right now?
Well, first of all, Venezuela should be one of the richest, wealthiest countries in the world because of everything we have, not only oil and gas and natural resources and great lands and great talented people, but we got socialism, corrupt Chavista socialism, and it destroyed everything. And it turned Venezuela into the criminal hub of the Americas, a safe haven for all the enemies of Western democracies and the United States. And from here, Venezuela represents a true threat for the safety and prosperity of the United States. So that's why I think it is very important for American people to understand what's at stake here, not only for Venezuelans, certainly, but for all of you. And I will mention only three main reasons. Why? One is the relationship between Maduro and the Iranian regime. I mean, this has been for decades now. Chavez and Maduro opened the doors of Venezuela to Latin America. They had given the Iranians and Syrians agents over 10,000 Venezuelan passports. Many of them have gone into Islamic terrorists. Secondly, they have turned Venezuela into the main channels of drugs in the region now. People estimate, experts estimate that there could be even 300 tons of drugs a year. Imagine what that means. And Venezuela has turned into a traffic zone, now into a producer. And the fact is that the cartels, they're not fighting, the government as in Mexico. Here, the cartels are in power. And top officials are involved and are the chiefs of El Cartel de los Soles. And as you know very well, El Cartel de los Soles is linked as well with the Tren de Aragua, the very sadly known gang that has, expanded throughout the region and is currently, killing and committing crimes in the United States. But we all know that the head of the Tren de Aragua is Maduro. The regime created, promoted, and fund the Tren de Aragua. And finally, I have to say migration. Maduro has intentionally promoted migration. Over a quarter of our population, good people, working people, professionals, talented people, have left our country because there's no future, because there's persecution, because there's no freedom, and uses Maduro migration as a weapon to destabilize the region. Everything can be solved. Everything will be solved once we have a democratic government, a serious government that puts order in Venezuela.
Well, this week, the White House explicitly said that my father stands in opposition to the Maduro regime. Maduro and Biden are the ones who flooded our nation with Tren de Aragua, as you mentioned. I mean, committing crimes, taking lives, and very open about it. I mean, we know they let in, think about it, 13,000 murderers into our nation, 16,000 rapists. That's Biden government statistics, 600,000 criminals, as part of the Biden-created invasion. It's wild. But can you put into perspective, the evils here? Did Maduro really empty the prisons? Is that just a talking point? What's his end game with all of this?
Oh, his end game is to damage and destabilize the United States, period. That's what they want. He's allied to the enemies of America. And that's something that is well known, and he publicized it. And certainly he did that. And he's using these criminal networks, Tren de Aragua and others, as a way to destabilize the region. Tren de Aragua is already executing operations in 7 countries in our continent. Tren de Aragua was used in 2017 to attack innocent protesters here in Venezuela. And as I say, they are now using the Tren de Aragua to get also other kind of resources and income for the regime. So, and you probably saw the face of Diosdado Cabello when he received some of the members of the Tren de Aragua. They were received as heroes. Mm-hmm. When we receive And when we are in the government in Venezuela, we will receive every single individual that has committed a crime, and they will face justice and punishment, because these are transnational organizations that need to be dismantled in a coordinated manner. That's precisely what we're going to do.
I mean, I love your passion, your will to fight. It's interesting. I see, so many Venezuelans. I live in Florida, so obviously, a lot of the Venezuelan migrants, the people who did so legally and or were actually escaping persecution, not escaping jail sentences for being criminal drug gangs, were such proponents of what my father was trying to do for America. And I think it's because they truly understand what the Democrat Party was bringing to America. And it's what they left, Venezuela for. It was the bad ideas that destroyed a once great nation. So it was amazing to sort of see that support. Is there things that the Venezuelan sort of expats that are now in America can do to help their own country, help you achieve what you're trying to do? Because it seems like such a noble cause.
Oh, absolutely. And let me tell you something. Most of Venezuelans abroad, as you say, and I know you have many Venezuelan friends, are good people, hardworking,
Great
that
people.
are investing and creating wealth and employment in the U.S. and around the world. But they want to come back. They want to come back to rebuild a nation that is going to be the strongest ally in the region for the United States and democracies in the Western Hemisphere. And certainly they're doing a lot. They're raising their voices and telling the world that there's no biggest opportunity from every perspective than a transition to democracy in Venezuela, that it's not true that Maduro is stronger. As I said before, the only thing he's got left is repression, because he knows the country hates him. He's totally isolated internationally, because the world knows how he has violated human rights, committed crimes against humanity, and it is a criminal gang, a narco regime in power, but they are fragile. So this is the moment to act, and act together. It is our responsibility done, and we assume it, to free Venezuela. And we are executing our plan, but certainly we need a strong ally in the United States that will benefit as much as us when this transition happens, and it will happen soon.
Yeah, I mean, I know, under Biden, we saw a reversal of the sanctions against Venezuela that my father put on in the first term. My father, many say, literally had him on the ropes. It was the same with Iran. They're basically running out of energy. They're running out of money. They have nowhere else to go. They're about to collapse. We sanctioned so many of the top drug kingpins, corrupt businessmen. But Biden let him off the hook. He opened up the spigot of the American money. We shut down American pipelines and started importing from Venezuela. It really seems that Biden and really Democrat weak leadership allowed Maduro the time and money to cozy up to China and Iran, making it harder for us to do that later. So Maduro is clinging on to power. But what is different now? What is different that can be done to stop the corruption and the evil? You mentioned sort of the military seems to be at least, not simply working for the regime anymore. How do you effectuate that kind of change, hopefully in a peaceful way?
Absolutely, in a peaceful way. And I would say, first of all, everything's different. I'll get into that. But I mentioned the past, because even though everything you said is true, there are still people that say, oh, maximum pressure didn't work. What do you mean didn't work?
Yeah, there wasn't maximum pressure.
We were almost there.
Yeah, we had
we
it,
were
and then they
almost
reversed
there.
it.
Absolutely. And the fact was that Maduro was, willing to accept a negotiation because he knew it was over. But then they gave him oxygen. They gave him time. He had a chance to recover. And then he unleashed this huge repression wave against Venezuelan people when we defeated him by a landslide. Mm-hmm. And now there are still some people that are saying, no, well, perhaps we can get an arrangement with a criminal gang, a drug cartel. So what's different now? Everything's different. First of all, we won, and the world knows it. And everybody knows Maduro is absolutely abandoned and cornered by the people. Secondly, what we mentioned about the military. The military are perhaps the sector of our population that are worst persecuted. I mean, they are spied with Chinese technology and by Cuban agents. There are hundreds of them that have been imprisoned or disappeared. Thousands that have been persecuted because the regime knows that all the structure, middle to low, is against them, as well as the police. Third, as I mentioned also, Maduro internationally is absolutely isolated. No one is going to lend him $1. And fourth, and this is very important, there is a very strong new administration that had the correct vision on how to address a criminal structure. This is not a political actor. This is a criminal structure that should be addressed from a law enforcement approach. And that is going to work. And finally, I would say the Venezuelan people choose serious, strong leadership, and we will not let go. We will never surrender. We have a plan to get rid of Maduro. We are executing it, and we will win this battle.
So, Maria, what do you say to skeptics in America who say, this is someone else's mess? Why should the U.S. taxpayer care? God knows. I've said that about Ukraine, where we're putting $250 billion into a place no one cared about prior to 3 years ago. Will U.S. taxpayers have to foot the bill to fix this mess instead of you handling it yourselves? We don't want another endless war to break out, but obviously this is a little different than Ukraine because this is right on our doorstep. I mean, quite essentially.
Absolutely.
But Americans are tired of that. What is your message? Is this different, or will this turn into sort of another America-funded civil war?
No, that has nothing to do with it. And first of all, I understand. Of course, I do. The American people are tired of wars and sending your troops abroad and spending huge amounts of money very far away. I understand that perfectly. But you mentioned it. Venezuela and Caracas is 3 hours away to Florida, to Miami. Exactly the same flight in terms of hours from DC to Miami. So we're very close. And the enemies of America are here, very close, in your backyard. And they are here for a reason. And having this regime here makes the United States an unsafer place. On the contrary, moving ahead in a transition, orderly, peaceful transition to democracy can be done. And this is good for American safety, prosperity, and freedom. And of course, this is our responsibility. We are doing our part. I mean, this is our country. There are more than 2,000 people in jail. People killed, persecuted, in hiding, such as I am right now, because we are willing to do what it takes. But this is a great opportunity, and it can be done. And people who talk about, civil wars, they know nothing. I mean, they don't understand what's going on in Venezuela. We do not have the religious differences. We do not have racial or political or regional or social difference. I mean, this is a society united. 90% of Venezuelan society want to get rid not only of Maduro, of socialism. I mean, when I started talking about fighting socialism 20 years ago, people said I was crazy because that was the only thing we had known in Venezuela. Now, 90% of the people understand that only with open markets, free markets, open societies, is that you can prosper and also that you can have your children home. I mean, we all have our children spread around the world. We want them back home and build a great nation that's going to be the biggest deal, the biggest economic opportunity also for American business and companies.
It sounds, absolutely amazing. And you're right. I guess 92% is different. When you have those sort of internal wars, it's usually 50-50 and each side's taking a stand, 90-something%. That's a pretty solid mandate. That's about as solid as it gets in all of politics. But Maria, you've been completely censored in your own country, something that so many Americans, certainly on my side of the political spectrum, have had to deal with over here. You a little bit more. Maduro's going after your family, your businesses. They kicked you off ballots. Platforms like Rumble that we're on right now are restricted in Venezuela, so it's hard to actually break through the narrative of the state-sponsored media. Do you see parallels to what my father had to endure in the last election to what they're doing to you?
Oh, certainly. And I see it in many places around the world. But believe me, I've never seen what is going on and happened here. You know?
Yeah, no, that's a whole different world. As bad as ours was, I complain a lot only because I was a target of it myself. But no, I mean, what they're doing to you is different. If you go to fill up your car at a gas station and they shut down the gas station for supporting you, that's a little problem. Though, they did want to put us in jail for 750 years, so not ideal.
Yeah,
we get it. I mean,
right.
it's never perfect, but you've had it worse.
We need to sit down for a couple hours to tell you everything we face and what we have learned. But we learned something. You can win an election without money. You can win an election without media. You know how many interviews I had on national TV or radio during my primary campaign and then the presidential campaign? 0. Not one. Not one. Journalists were threatened. If they get me to interview me, they would close the media outlet. They will persecute them. And as you said, I was banned from taking flights, local flights. I had to go with my car. If I stopped to buy food in a restaurant, they went and closed the restaurants for even tiny, humble ones, for 2 or 3 months. There's one case, I have to tell you this, in Corozopando, a very humble place. We stopped in the eastern part of Venezuela. And when we left, the equivalent of the IRS, the tax agency came and closed it. So people started calling and through the social network of the small restaurant to buy empanadas for them. Oh. And actually, in a week, they sold the equivalent of the whole year, wow. Because of what they had done to them. So people reacted towards censorship, towards persecution, and we overcame every single obstacle. But why did they did that? Oh, because Maduro simply was afraid of me. He feared me. Yeah. He knew I would beat him. And actually, we did it, even with somebody else, a great ambassador who accepted to take my place. So this was huge.
So how do you break through that, right? The censorship, I saw it when they did it, when they threw my father off Twitter back in 2020. I dealt with it with the shadow banning and the attacks. And, for me, it worked because I already had a large platform. I was able to get on Rumble and build quickly because I had a following. So I said, hey, before they throw me off here, follow me on Telegram, hit me in these other places so you can get it. How did you break through all of that? Because that would seem to be an almost insurmountable obstacle. If you can't be, even if they covered my father, it was always negative, but he at least got coverage. And then people can decide for themselves, even through the noise, even through the bias, they still got some of it. How did you break through that you can have such a decisive victory without any actual media in a nation, especially where so much of social itself is also censored? So it's not like you had that many other avenues. How did you get that message out there? How did the people band together in such a formidable way?
I would say organization. People realized what this meant. This is a new era that has already started in Venezuela. I mean, this is a social and cultural movement against socialism, against corruption, against evil, against violence, against families divided, against poverty. People want to live well, with dignity, with their own work. And so we realized that we had to create networks. And of course, we had social media. I mean, even though the regime went against them to block them, and they had internet blackouts and things like that, people find a way. So I know I was surprised because I reached these super tiny towns, 15 hours away that I had to go driving. And I said, well, nobody's going to show up. They don't know I'm coming. And suddenly you see hundreds and thousands of people, even to threaten. They told them that if they'd come to join me, they would lose their jobs, they would lose their handouts and things like that. And people went courageously. So that's why I tell you, Don, this has no way back. I mean, this is an existential fight for freedom. And you are seeing this happening around the world. And people speaks with the truth, with pride, even though, yes, we are facing horrible repression as we speak. But we're going to move forward because we know we have true allies now that understand the value that Venezuela represents for this new security approach of the Americas, of our continent.
Well, it also seems you have really strong allies in leaders like Milei in Argentina, Bukele in El Salvador, Meloni in Italy, and even Elon Musk. What could a free and prosperous Venezuela mean for reshaping all of the Americas? We're talking about that bolstering up American security against adversaries like China and Iran. How does that look to you? What would your vision be if you were in charge?
Oh, wow. This is the great part. It's and you mentioned really good friends. Javier Milei is a super good friend. Giorgia Meloni has been so supportive to us. But imagine, you know what we're going to do? We're going to turn Venezuela from the criminal hub of the Americas into the energy hub of the Americas. That's what we are talking about. Forget about Saudi Arabia. Forget about the Saudis. I mean, we have more oil. I mean, infinite potential. And we're going to open markets. We're going to kick off the government from the oil sector. We are going to privatize all our industry. Venezuela has huge resources: oil, gas, minerals, land, technology. And as you said before, we have a strategic location, hours from the United States. So we're going to do this right. We know what we have to do. We know the failure to solution has been, and we're going to put order. We're going to have rule of law. It's going to be clear, transparent. It's going to be so attractive that no other country in the world is going to be competitive to what we're going to design. And American companies are in, super strategic position to invest. I know that some people have come to President Trump and say, well, why can we make some business with Maduro? And I say, really? So you want to be a partnership with the cartel, the drug cartel? Is that what you're proposing? But also to do what? Very little money. This is crumbs. Venezuela should be producing right now over 6 million barrels a day. It's barely a million. And who's going to invest in a country in which you have a criminal in power that any moment can change the rules or rob you? So what I'm talking is about huge opportunities done. Yeah. And this is open in a win-win relationship for our Venezuelan people and also for the American people.
Well, we just have some big breaking news actually right now. My team just sent it to me. Literally just now. So we're recording this about 2 hours in advance of the show. Obviously, you're in hiding. We're trying to keep things separate from that. But by the time this airs at 6, people may already know that. But literally just now, my father killed the Chevron license. Literally happening right now. I'm assuming that I'm just getting that. So I'm assuming that's oil and gas. So Chevron, who's an American company, was able to have the license to do this, supporting a dictatorial, illegal regime. Apparently, that's just been revoked. Your reaction?
Wow, I'm just learning about it. Talking about
Me too.
understanding.
Oh my God, wow, that's a big one.
Talking about understanding what ought to be done. Maduro has to understand that President Trump is serious about behaving well, and that the criminals will be held accountable. This country, Venezuela, is going to be the brightest opportunity for investment of American companies, of good people that are going to make a lot of money, but it's going to turn also very positive, of course, for the Venezuelan people. What you just mentioned, it's a proof for me that President Trump is on the side of the Venezuelan people, of democracy and prosperity for the U.S. and for Venezuela as well.
Yeah, it feels like, oil is maybe the only thing they have left under this, regime, perhaps that and the illegal drug trade. And Maduro's cronies are sitting on it. They're profiteering from it. They're skimming from it. Hopefully this is something that pulls that card away from him, that he can't keep wreaking this havoc. I guess we're going to find out if he's really weak or if he's actually strong once he loses that sort of lifeline, so to speak.
Believe me, Maduro is terrified with Donald Trump, terrified. And the regime is as well. They thought that, the world will turn the page on all their crimes, their liaisons with Iran, with Hezbollah, with Hamas, with the drug cartels, all the crimes that they have committed, the threats to U.S. security. They thought people would turn the page back, and that's simply not going to happen. As I mentioned, we've never had a bigger opportunity than we have right now, biggest opportunity to move ahead and make them understand that their only option is a negotiated, orderly, peaceful transition. And this, what you just told me, is exactly the path ahead.
Well, we actually have my father's official statement on the revocation of the Chevron license. And it says, and I quote, "We are hereby reversing the concessions that crooked Joe Biden gave to Nicolás Maduro of Venezuela on the oil transaction agreement dated November 26, 2022. So this kills the Chevron license, correct? I mean, you think this is the opportunity that perhaps you need to get him to the table to make sure people understand that America actually means business and that, let's just say, those concessions are no longer going to allow them just to continue this nonsense.
This is a huge step, and this sends a clear, firm message that Maduro is in huge trouble, and President Trump is with the Venezuelan people, with security, freedom, prosperity, and peace for the whole region. This is huge. It feels well strange to learn about the decision of the president.
I thought this was going to be we're breaking news within breaking news.
No, and read by his son. I mean, this is kind of strange.
For the record, I had no idea that was going on because someone they'll try to arrest me again here for the seeming coincidence, but.
I have my doubts. I don't know if you're. This is quite a coincidence, but it's a good coincidence, and it gives me the opportunity to send my gratitude to President Trump through you. This is the correct thing to do. It's the right thing to do. It's the right moment to do, and I'm sure that this will have consequences in the very short term. And I'm sure Venezuelan people right now feel secure that we are not alone.
Maria, I know you're also a huge advocate for cryptocurrency. Obviously something, we're big advocates on because we've seen sort of the warped nature of the typical financial structure. I think the democratization of finance is a great idea. So important for so many people around the world, especially in circumstances like yours under a dictatorial regime. I can certainly see the benefits. Can you talk about that, how it could free so many people from this oppression? What are your thoughts?
Well, I've been into Bitcoin for quite a time, and I think it is the platform and through which a lot of people, as you say, can overcome the kind of persecution the regime has done, what it did in the media, in the financial sector. And I think in the case of Venezuela, we have huge opportunities for Bitcoin in our government. And I have also talked about it in several specialized spaces, because I think that the oil sector could also have put a lot of boost and energy in Bitcoin in Venezuela.
Would you advocate for some sort of strategic reserve in Venezuela eventually, taking some of that oil money, converting it into a Bitcoin reserve, so to speak, or and any of the other the big ones out there?
Oh yes, I have mentioned that. I think part of Venezuelan reserves in Bitcoin could be a very powerful tool in the future.
That's excellent. When you talk about the next steps for you, how does it work? Is there another election that they're just going to ignore? Hopefully these sanctions, I guess, is what they would be. Force that hand a little bit. But what's the purpose of the elections if they're just going to be ignored? Is it just about getting the will of the people to understand, and eventually, that dam has to break? It's sort of hard to believe it doesn't break at 90%, because again, I think that's unheard of in the world of politics. But what are those next steps for you and for the people of Venezuela?
This is a very good question, Don. I mean, on July 28th, when the regime realized that they weren't going to get out with their fraud, because we were able to collect the tally sheets. And I have to tell you, not only we scanned them, we were able to put them on a website thanks to Starlink, the Starlink equipment that we have got secretly uncovered in our country. Mm-hmm. That day, Maduro decided to close any possibility of election in the future. I mean, they didn't publish one number. They just decided Maduro was the winner, period, without showing one number. They went against our polling monitors. They got our people in prison just because they refused to give away the tally sheets they were defending. So obviously, they closed the electoral path while Maduro is in power. But we have to build enough pressure to create the incentives for Maduro to understand that staying in power is going to be much more costly than accepting a transition to democracy. And that's precisely what we need to do right now. The only thing Maduro has left, as I say, is the money that right now started to be cut, and repression. Once we weaken repression and we are organizing and relaunching our civic movement, there's nothing left for him but to go, and he will have to go done.
Well, yeah, no, I think you're 100% right. And for those of you who are just tuning in right now, as I said, breaking news, it's literally happening right now. The Biden-era Chevron license in Venezuela is dead. My father is just announcing this. Can you just again just perhaps explain how big a deal that is? Because again, I think that it's the oil that's kept all of that afloat. I know we had other big news. Rick Grinnell was just in Venezuela bringing back 6 American hostages. Maduro now claims he'll take back more deportees. Those next steps, it feels like he's definitely on the ropes. He's starting to work. What do you see as next steps, and what do you think that relationship will be like for Venezuela, perhaps yourself and the new Trump administration?
Well, there are many things what you have said. I want to go through them quickly. First, for every dollar Chevron got, Maduro got $3.
Wow.
That's how bad it is. It's billions of dollars that he has used for repression, persecution, and corruption. That's over. That's so important. Secondly, of course, I'm aware of the task and the propose of the visit of the special envoy Richard Grinnell. I spoke with him before and after his visit, and I understand he had a mission to take the hostages back home. And I have great relations, I have to say, with many members of the Trump administration. Mike Waltz has been a true champion, ally of the Venezuelan cause. Of course, he's the national security advisor. Marco Rubio while he was a senator, he was one of the strongest voices to defend the Venezuelan cause and Cuba and Nicaragua, because once Maduro goes, you will see Cuba and Nicaragua fall as well. And Venezuela and Latin America and the Americas will be, for the first time, free of socialism and communism and tyrannies. And certainly we have great friends in Congress, such as Senator Rick Scott and the representatives Mario Diaz-Balart, Maria Elvira Salazar, Carlos Jimenez, the Speaker, Johnson. Sir Johnson is a great supporter of our cause. So we know we are surrounded by a great team that trusts Venezuela, and we trust them as well.
Well, Maria, we've seen what a change in leadership can do for people of countries like El Salvador with Bukele. I mean, just what an amazing turnaround from one of the highest crime nations in the world to one of the lowest in a few years. You've seen it with Milei in Argentina, turning what seemed like just an infinite stagflation to balanced budgets. So to finish up, imagine that you're sitting with my father. What would you tell him? What's your concrete plan? How do you make the election that you won actually be acknowledged? And how do you have a peaceful transfer of power to, stop the chaos? How do you do this without turning Venezuela into another, a Libya or Iraq, which would be examples of sort of, where that went wrong and just, led to just downright instability?
Well, I really look forward to that moment. I really do. And I would say, look, Mr. President, Venezuela is the biggest opportunity in this continent for you, for the American people, and for all the people in our continent, certainly for Venezuelans. And we have the plan to move forward. We're actually already executing it. The plan to get Maduro out. We assume our responsibility. We do our part here, and we have proved it so far. And we will never stop working days and night. But we need a true ally that exactly knows what to do. We don't need boots on the ground. We don't need soldiers in Venezuela. That's crazy. We don't even need resources, because we have the possibility to pay for our freedom and to pay for the rebuilding of our country. We have those resources. Other countries, unfortunately, do not have it. And we have this plan ready to work together for rebuilding Venezuela, opening markets, and getting, great opportunities for all the actors in business in the U.S. and in the region. And I want to be very clear regarding, these fears about what happened in Libya, as you mentioned, or Syria. Look, there is zero possibility of a civil war in Venezuela. Zero. This is a country that is united. And I tell you, even the military, even the police want this change as much as we do. And we know what to do the first day we arrive in power. We have 100-day emergency plan for every single sector. We have our teams with talented professional people, some here, many around the world, that are desperate to come back and start rebuilding the nation. That is, as I say, we're going to turn it from the criminal hub of the Americas into the energy hub of the Americas, the strongest ally in security, in energy, and in democracy for the United States. That's what we are going to be, and we're going to do it together.
Well, María Corina Machado, thank you so much. What an incredible moment in history. I just truly honor your bravery, all of the things that you're doing. I think it's a great example for so many people in the world. So thank you. I really appreciate it. I wish you all the luck. Anything I can help do to support that, make sure your voice is heard and amplified. It'd be an honor to be a tiny part of it. So keep going strong. I really look forward to seeing what you can do with your country.
Thank you so much, Don. This means a lot to us. We know we can count on you, and trust us. Trust the Venezuelan people. We're going to do it right, and we will win. Don't doubt it. Thank you so much. Take care.
Thank you again. Be well.
¿Usted qué opina? Déjenos sus comentarios. No olvide suscribirse a nuestro canal, compartir este video, y darle clic al botón de la campanita para estar informado de las últimas noticias sobre Venezuela.